पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तरदिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे astu shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu. Sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyanto. Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani. Sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu. Sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Satoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. With the Divine consciousness, fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on Sutra number 7 on page 54. Sa na kamayamana nirodha rupatvat. Sa, that is the devotion, na kamayamana, does not require anything else, rupatvat, being of the nature of nirodha, which means control. Devotion does not require anything else because it is attained through complete control of the senses. We saw that the text begins with first describing the nature of devotion itself. How bhakti is this highest supreme love for God. In the next few verses we saw what the effect of that love is on a devotee. How that devotee, when that love completely fills the heart of a devotee, how all grief is eliminated, how all hatred is eliminated, and so on. And now the text comes back again to speaking about that bhakti itself, the nature of that love itself. So after describing what that love does to a devotee, now the text comes back to tell us more about the nature of that love. And here we see that love here, devotion, it doesn't require anything because it is attained through a complete control of the senses. What is meant is this. A kind of question that all devotees can ask themselves. Why do I love God? When we are asked why do we turn to spiritual life, we might have many different answers. Krishna describes in the Gita at least 4 reasons why people turn towards God. In Sanskrit, he says these 4 kinds of people are Artho, Jitnyasu, Artharthi, Jnani cha. So, simple, just 4 categories. Artha. Artha means a person who is suffering for some reason or other. And we know there is a lot of pain and suffering in life. Most of us, whenever there is any cause for suffering, naturally none of us wants to suffer, so we try to find a remedy for it. Oftentimes the first instinct is to find the remedy that's easily available. When the remedies that are easily available to us don't seem to work, even people who don't have that much faith or belief in God, as a last resort, say, well, nothing seems to work, let me go and pray. A devotee of God who believes in God may not wait until that last moment. So God is one a devotee turns to remove the pain and sorrow and suffering in our life. And many of us come into that category. So why do I pray to God? Because then God will remove the present pain that I have. So that's one reason why we turn to God, to remove our problems. If we are in trouble, then we need to go to a divine troubleshooter. And God is the one who knows the solutions to all problems. The second reason sometimes we can turn to God is what the Gita says is jidnyasu, the one who is a desire to know. Sometimes we are faced with these questions, some basic questions of life, such as, how did all this come about? What is this mystery of life and death? Where do people really go after death? Did I exist before I was born? What is the purpose of life? What is the goal of life? And how many of us can say that we have a definitive answers to these questions? We don't know. So we feel intensely our ignorance about answers to these questions. And sometimes, therefore, one reason we might turn to God is, if I somehow can get in touch with God, God can explain all this to me. God, a believer in God, a devotee of God will say, I really want to know the answers to these questions. And only one being can answer that question, and that is God. So that could be a second reason why people turn to God, that intense awareness of ignorance in our heart and a desire to remove that ignorance, the desire to know, desire to get knowledge. The third reason, Gita says, is artharthi. Artha means any object that is desired. And arthi means one who is desiring it. For instance, for a student, the word that in Sanskrit and many Indian languages is vidyarthi. Vidya is knowledge, arthi is one who wants. So, although we sometimes translate the word vidyarthi into English as simply a student, literally, the word vidyarthi means one who seeks vidya, one who seeks knowledge. Can we say that about everyone who self-identifies as student? Everyone who goes to school or college, are they really seeking knowledge? Because sometimes we just go to school because everyone goes to school. And so it's not a very conscious decision, I'm going to school because I want knowledge. In fact, a lot of people just see that, well, school is essential. If I get a degree, then I can get a good job, and I'll find a livelihood. So for many of these people who think this way, what they are seeking is not knowledge, but a degree. So degree arthi would be a better description than vidyarthi. So artharthi here means anything that is worth striving for, anything that has artha, anything that is meaningful to me. Again, we know from our own lives, there are a lot of things in our lives we would like to have. Some simple, small things to really big things. So, one way to fulfill our needs is to work hard and find the means to get those needs. And sometimes it might so happen that my needs are so big and my means may not be sufficient. And then, therefore, someone says, prays to God and says, God, I really need this. Because we know that God, out of His or her grace, more of her grace, now that we're going to have Kali Puja tomorrow, will give me what I want. And so artharthi means
turning towards God, turning towards divine help, in order that through God's help I will get the things I need in life. So that's the third reason. And a fourth reason we turn to God is what Krishna calls jnani. Literally means a person of knowledge. But what is implied in that context is the true spiritual seeker. And from the context of the bhakti yoga, that would mean a one whose heart is filled with love. Such a person turns to God because that's the only place this person can turn to. Not in order to get something, but that's all that this person. It's a little bit like this. When we truly love something in life, something or someone in life, and if someone were to ask you, why do you love that thing? Why do you love that person? If we are able to kind of enumerate 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons of why we are able to love it, then it's probably not a very natural, effortless love. It's because love, by definition, there are no calculations behind it. No one, and love, and all of us have experienced love in our heart. Could be for place, people, things. And how many of us have sat and made a list, oh, these are the things I like, and therefore I must love this or love that. Love never happens that way. Love is either you love someone or something or you don't. There is no reasoning involved behind it. There might be a reasoning involved we might be able to find some natural reasons, say, oh, these are the reasons I'm fond of this or I like this. That's understandable. But love is oftentimes completely unreasonable. And you know that because even amongst friends who may have a lot in common, you might really love something and the other person might just hate it. So there may be two close friends and one might be just loves, say, Apple products, say Macs, and the other person is like, no, I love Windows. And maybe they share a lot in common. Again, there may not be any specific reason on why I love this or why I love that. So what I'm saying is that love for God is a little bit like that. That when love for God enters into our heart, there is no calculation involved. That is, oh, if I love God, then God will give me moksha. God will give me liberation. God will give me whatever I want. I mean, that's also love, but it's a love of a lower category. It's a love that involves a little bit of self-interest. So in that case, we really have to ask that when I say I love God, and if someone asks me why you love God, and I say, oh, because loving God, all my problems will go away. I will get whatever I want. I will be eternally happy. I'll be immortal. Then probably we don't love God per se. What I love is myself. I want to be happy, and so I'm using God as a means. So my goal is not God. My goal is my own happiness. My goal is my own freedom. I want to be free, and God will make me free. That is why I love God. In other words, God becomes a means to an end, not the end itself. Now that's not bad, but that's not the highest. So devotion in the highest sense of the term means God is the goal. God is not the means to a goal. So in that highest state of love, a devotee will not even say, oh, I want to be free from all this birth and death, free from samsara. I want to be free, and that is why I love God. Okay, but better, a higher, a time will come when I will love God and someone says, Why do you love God? I don't know. I just love God. That would be the answer. When that highest love fills the heart, then one is not, then God becomes the end. God doesn't become the means to an end. So, as long as our love for God is motivated by some other things that I need or fulfilling of some of my needs, then that love is still in a preliminary stage, in a preparatory stage. And so that stage of devotion is sometimes called a Gauni Bhakti. Gauna means preliminary or the initial stage of bhakti. So in the first stage of devotion, our sense of self is still strong. And when my I is strong, then naturally it's unavoidable that I will be conscious of what this I needs. And then because I love God, because I have faith in God, because I believe in God, I will feel whatever this I needs, I love God and God will give me. When that love, I just love God because of God, then this self by that time is completely gone. And as I sometimes like to say, a favorite example of mine, which is rather an extreme case of when that love enters and the self completely goes away, then your prayer can take a very bizarre form. It will not be your regular kind of prayer, because normally the prayer that we understand is, well, asking something for God. That's what prayer means. But when that self completely goes away, who is the one who is asking? And for what? Asking for whom? Because the I itself is completely disappeared. So there is this great saint in southern India, about probably almost 1,000 years ago, this event seems to have happened, as we find in the records, that this great saint, he had so completely, the sense of I had vanished from his heart, that when he sat for prayer, all that remained in his heart was not I, because I is gone. Only God only remained in this field of consciousness. And so what kind of a prayer would that be when this I is absent? Only the object of love is present. And then we see that prayer was this devotee who is praying said, "Oh God, may you have no difficulties at all. May you live long." It was just as the way a mother would pray for her baby, or a one who would pray for one's beloved. That's how as I said, this prayer will be very bizarre, because at that time, this devotee is not even thinking, he's just thinking that I want the object of my love to be happy. So all logic and everything disappears at that point. And that's the test of love. When love matures, when love becomes, goes to that highest category, then this I goes away. And it's all about you. Swami Vivekananda mentioned this story from the Sufi tradition, how there was this one person who was sitting in his room and was expecting his beloved any moment. And then there was a knock at the door. And then, so he said, "Who is it?" And then the answer came from the other side of the door, "It's me." I said, the door didn't open. Then once again, the person knocked. Again, the question came, "Who is it?" "It's me." The door didn't open. It just kind of went on for a while like this. And then suddenly, once again, this person knocked. Once again, there was a question, "Who is it?" And then he said, "It's you." When he said you, then the door opened. So as long as this I remains, the door will not open. So if we want the door to the divine being opened, the door to our heart to be opened, this I has to get out of the way. That is the most important thing. So, love, therefore, has two dimensions. At the lower dimension, that's the mundane kind of love. And that is the love that draws us towards anything that is other than God, anything that is other than the infinite, towards the finite, perishable things of this world, both living and non-living. So when our love is pulled by these perishable entities, that is the lower dimension of love. And a higher dimension of love is, the object of love is God, the only non-perishable entity. That is why one of the practices in the path of devotion is, even when as seekers of God, we are living and moving among perishable entities, both living and non-living. That's who we are always amongst. So the practice is that even when I encounter all these objects and people in the world around me, the more I'm able to affirm and remember that there is divine present in them, then my loving these objects or people or places will not completely separate me from the divine. Because even when I love everyone and everything around me, if I keep this consciousness alive in my heart, that there is God present in them, then I can still remain connected with God. And in a higher stage of that would be to recognize that my love for everyone and everything is really a love for the divine in the heart of that thing. That's why sometimes when we say the Indian form of greeting, saying namaste, namaha in Sanskrit means just a salutation. Te means to you. So I bow down to you or I salute you. Now, who is that you? For a devotee of God, that you is the divine sitting in the heart of the person in front of me. And so sometimes people have this big ego. Why should I bow down to this person? Because we're like, I'm someone big. It just feels... I'll tell you one story. There was one of our Swamis years ago was asked this question when he was on a tour. Someone said, "Oh, why do people bow down before you? Why do people salute you? Why should I do it?" And then the Swami said, you don't have to do it. If you feel, and if in bowing down, if you feel humiliated, you don't have to do it. But if you, by bowing down, if you feel a sense of upliftment, you feel that you're doing something right, something good, then you do it. And the good thing to remember, therefore, is when we are bowing down before anyone, if we think, well, that's another one person, why should I bow down to anybody? Then that's not really the pranam that we say, the bowing down, even people whom we revere, we will be recognizing the presence of the divine in their heart. And even when we bow down, we are bowing down to the divine in them. And it's easier to remember the presence of God in other people when we are able to remember the presence of God in our own heart. It's not as if God is there only in their heart and this is just empty. It doesn't work that way. So if we consciously try to remember God is in my own heart, then we have got to admit that God is not sitting only in my heart. God is in the heart of everyone. And so it goes both ways. So it's a helpful practice, therefore, that as we begin the day, when we wake up in the morning, to consciously try to remember the presence of God in our own heart. Another one helpful practice is, every time you go out of your room or leave your office or you go out of your home, if you make it a habit that every person I'm going to see today, I'm going to just ping myself inside and say, there is God in the heart of that person. It's not as difficult as it might seem. If we can make it a habit to remind ourselves frequently in the course of a day, after a few days you will see it'll be very natural. You don't have to tell the other person, I'm seeing God in you. That you don't have to do that. But it's just a kind of a self-reminder. It's magical, really, because you will see, just remembering that there is God present in the heart of the person in front of me, the way I deal with that person, the way I speak, the way my body language, my words, everything will change. It may not be a very radical change, but you will see over time, the more I try to remember there is God present in others, our interpersonal relations will take a better and a higher turn. It'll be wonderful. In fact, a lot of disharmony and a lot of misunderstanding that occurs in interaction between people is because we just interact with each other at very low level. But what distinguishes a spiritual seeker from others is, if I make a conscious effort to remember there is spirit, the divine spirit in me, and there is divine spirit in every person around me, especially the person right in front of me now. That kind of a conviction is very, very helpful. And so these are the things we need to remember. That because sometimes love for God might seem to be accompanied by desires, because God is the fulfiller of all desires. To negate that idea, this sutra says, no, bhakti or devotion is not the fulfillment of desire, it's in fact the negation of desire. So getting that highest love, all desires will go away from the heart. So if we want to look upon devotion itself as a desire, we have to say it's a desire to eliminate all desires. Because once that highest love enters the heart, there'll be no desires in the heart. And if we are anytime not sure whether that highest love has entered in my heart or not, we just have to ask ourselves, do I have any desires in me? And as long as I feel, well, there are some desires left, so well, I have some more work to do. My love has to be refined even more. That's the idea. Let's go to the next sutra. That's on page 59. Nirodhastu loka veda vyapara nyasaha. Control or cessation means discarding public opinion, the injunction of the Vedas, and all activities. So, what does this nirodha or control mean? Now, nirodha has two distinct implications. So, the first meaning of nirodha is described in the Sutra 8, and the next one will be described in Sutra 9. In the commentary of Vyasa on this particular sutra, Vyasa says that love for God or love is a kind of a river that is flowing in two directions. In one direction is virtue, the other direction is vice. One direction is the direction of good, the other is the direction of not good. And here, what this verse points out, the aphorism of Sutra 8 is of that control. So, There are two things that has to be done. That it's a river flowing in two directions. One direction is that takes me away from God, the other is takes me towards God. So nirodha, a control, means I have to stop that current, stop that flow which takes me away from God. And that's the negative side of it, stopping. And the positive side, which will be described in the next sutra, is I have to consciously motivate myself in the other direction, which takes me nearer to God. So this is about the negative aspect, about controlling. Control or cessation means discarding public opinion, the injunction of the Vedas, and all activities. So here is this important question. What is it that motivates us to do things in life? There is a very ancient Sanskrit saying, prayojanam anuddishya na mandopi pravartate. That is, without a motive, even a stupid person doesn't undertake any activity without a motive. And that's true. If we look at the things that we do in life, there's always some motive behind it. The nature of that motive might change, but a motive is always there. The word vyapara here in Sanskrit, all activities, although it's translated as all activities, it's primarily, this word vyapara in Sanskrit is primarily used for mental activities. Physical activities, the word kriya is the one that is more used. So here, although vyapara means all activities, we have to recognize that it's primarily about the attitude, the mental attitude, how we look at the work that we do. And so it says, discarding public opinion and the injunction of the Vedas and all activity. So, for a religious person, one of the motivation for doing things is, I'm doing this, even if it's a good, very good work, I'm doing this because this is what the scriptures say. This is what Krishna said we should do, that's why I'm doing it. This is what the Bible or the Quran says, I'm following the text, I'm following the scriptures. Or, in the secular sphere, a lot of things that we do motivates us either out of a sense of duty, because, well, I've got to do it, it's my duty. Or what is sometimes called social conformism, that is conforming to what the society or the community expects of me. There are a lot of things that we would rather not do, or rather sometimes we might be too lazy to do. But we say, oh, that's not good. Sometimes people say, it doesn't look nice. Or what will people say if I do it? Sometimes you have some papers to be thrown away and you are out in the park and the dustbin or the trash bag is far away. And you're like, oh, I'm feeling so lazy. I don't want to go all that distance to throw this there. And so there could be a temptation. Well, who is going to know? There are so many people here in the park. Who's going to know who threw this piece of paper here? Let me just drop it here and go. But then sometimes people say, no, what if someone sees? What will they think of me? This is not the right thing to do. So all these expectations of other people, or the fear of a public censure, or the expectation of praise. If I do something, people will appreciate it, and I will rise in their esteem. So there are a lot of these things, either actuated by fear or expectation of the community around us, or I should do this because this is what the Gita says I have to do. And what Narada points out here is that in that highest state of love, both these things are absent. That a person, it doesn't mean the person does something bad. It doesn't mean that this person ignores what the scriptures say. But this person does good because that's what this person does, not because the scriptures say it. This person tells the truth because that's what this person does, not because it's good to speak truth. My favorite story about this is that of the Buddha. We read in Buddha's life that we know that he lived to a ripe old age. And years later, years after his enlightenment, when Buddha was fairly advanced in age, he would carry out all the disciplines that were meant even for the youngest novice in the monastery. And if you have read the Buddhistic book of rules, there are hundreds of them. It's pretty intricate. There's rules for everything. How you get up, what kind of robes you wear, how you should walk. There's lots and lots of rules. And Buddha would follow all of them, even when his body had become infirm because of age. So some of his closest disciples once went to him and said, you don't have to do all this. These rules were meant for the training of the young novices so that they should learn discipline. It was meant for them. You don't have to do it. You don't have to follow these rules. And the Buddha listened to what they said. He understood they were saying out of love for him, out of concern that he didn't need to do it. Buddha laughed and then said, you are right. I don't need to follow the rules. And he said, I don't. But when I was young, I followed all these disciplines. So these years of practice now, I don't follow the rules follow me. In other words, I'm not doing all this because this is what I must do. This has become my nature. So I'm not doing it because it is a rule. I'm just doing it because that's what I do. So that's what is meant here. When that highest love enters the heart, all these calculations, as I said before, are removed. You don't do it because the book says it. You don't do it because of worry about what other people might say. You do what is right, you do what is good, because that's who you are. If you want to be poetic about it, we might like to think, and this is possible in a Walt Disney movie, like for instance, the sun, every morning the sun wakes up and says, I better go and give heat and light to the world. If I don't do, this world will perish. What will people think of me? I don't think, even if the sun were kind of a person, that's what the sun might think. The sun can't do anything else. The sun, by just being the sun, gives heat and light. That's who the sun is. The sun doesn't calculate or why I should give heat or why I should give light. Exactly in the same way, a true spiritual seeker will do what is right, do what is good, because of who that person is. So we have to be truthful, not because being truthful is what the scriptures say, or we have to be honest, not in order to acquire the praise and esteem of our contemporaries or our peers, but that's who I am. In other words, I will be good even if there is no one around me to appreciate my goodness. I will do what is right even when there's nobody who will know if I do something wrong. As they say sometimes, when we are in the company of other people, we generally are very good because we know people are watching, so I have to do what is right. But the real test is when we are just by ourselves, when there is no one to judge us. How am I then? Fortunately, our thoughts are all just private thoughts. At least our actions, that's what the world sees. So we are at least very careful about how we appear to others and what kind of things that we do. But what's going on inside our heads, only we know. No one else knows. But can we be comfortable? As they say, that people who went to Sri Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna said he could see through them as through a glass case. I don't know, but it might be interesting to kind of at least imagine how many of the people who knew this about Ramakrishna were completely comfortable going in front of him, knowing that, well, he's just seeing you right inside, what's inside. That's the kind of life we should strive for. That even if we were completely transparent, even if everyone in the world could not just see how I appear externally, but even what's going on inside my head, I will still feel comfortable. There is no need for me to hide anything. We have to strive to reach a stage in life when we can live in such a way, as they say, that I don't have to hide my diary. That level of transparency will come when that highest love fills our heart. When it will be just like an open glass case. There will be nothing to hide, nothing to be afraid of. There is no expectation of any kind. We are just being our true selves. So that is what is meant here by saying such a person discards public opinion or discards the injunction of the Vedas. Discarding in the sense doesn't care. This person is good because this person is good, not because of anything else. That's the idea. So the other meaning of Nirodha, the other aspect, the positive aspect of it, we will see next week. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions about what we have seen today, feel free to ask.
Swamiji, you told us one way to remind ourselves about the divinity in others is, well, each time we see somebody other than ourselves, it's easy to be triggered to remind ourselves to look for their divinity. What are some ways in our daily life we can adopt to remind ourselves about the divinity within ourselves?
One helpful thing is to begin the day reminding yourself that there is God or your Ishta sitting in your heart. End the day before you go to bed. Again, remind yourself. So these are the 2 points we can do very consciously. Begin the day in one way, end the day in the same way. And in the course of the day, find ways to remind yourself. And as I said, we can be very creative about these things. Some of the kind of repetitive things that we tend to do in life, associate this self-reminder with that activity. For instance, you can say, well, every time I sit in the car, before I start the car, I'm going to remind myself there's God sitting in my heart. Or every time I stop at the red light, I'm going to remind myself. Again, you find your own way. So if you can kind of associate whatever things that we need to be reminded of in a particular way, then it becomes easier. Nowadays, some of the reminder apps have what do they call? I think they call it GPS. There is some word that is used. I forget. Anyway, there are certain apps which, if you want to say, have to go and buy something from Stop and Shop, and how to remind yourself of it, because you might remember that while leaving home, but afterwards you get busy with so many things and you may forget. Now there are certain apps, because your smartphone knows where you are, so when you are near any Stop and Shop, that reminder will pop up and say, you get to get these things from this document. So something like that. So if I can associate this, even like remembering your mantra or doing a mental japa, even if it's for half a minute or 1 or 2 times, or remembering that you are divine, or remembering this world is filled with God, just whichever kind of self-reminder you want to give yourself, find creative ways to associate it with something. And it will definitely help.
Swamiji, the way Narada defines the perfect devotee, how is that different from an enlightened person?
A perfect devotee is an enlightened person.
So before enlightenment, no devotee is perfect, right? I mean, wouldn't there be a self-interest until that state? Wouldn't there be a self-interest until you
Again, it's like the chicken and egg problem. Would self-interest go after enlightenment comes, or will enlightenment come after self-interest goes? So it's like this. When we are struggling for that enlightenment, whatever of these things that we do will not be perfect, understandably. But the whole process of struggle means over time, my level of imperfection will become less and less and less and less. And at some point, it becomes 0. And then I'm enlightened. So yes, there is imperfection, but if my imperfection remains constant or it's increasing, that means I'm far away from enlightenment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Swamiji, related to that and related to the arti that you described, so many people get disillusioned with the things of the world and they try to find meaning somehow in the world. And so some people look to spirituality and God for meaning. So I assume that category of person would also be within arti because they're trying to find meaning within life. And then also there's the, in the song to Ramakrishna where they talk about, God is the goal of everyone, regardless of whether they know it or not.
Sure.
So then those type of people also might be within that category.
Absolutely.
And then related to the previous question, then the ideal devotee would be the last phase, which would be the jnani. So is the jnani that Krishna talked about basically the enlightened person already?
No. The jnani in that particular verse doesn't mean enlightened. It means one who has recognized that seeking other things is not worth it. Seeking God is the only worthwhile activity. And that's why you're right. When we begin, it's usually a love with some desire. But when that love matures, when we go closer and closer to God, we'll suddenly discover that what we have been seeking, that God can give me much more than what I'm seeking. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of going to God and asking for the kind of things that we do is like going to an emperor. An emperor says, ask what you want. And I said, 5 pounds of eggplant or something like that. Now, of course, the emperor can give it to me, obviously. But then, when you're in the presence of the emperor and you know, oh, the emperor can give me so much more. What am I asking this? Just a little bit of peace of mind and just kind of good sleep at night? Or just kind of winning a lottery? Or whatever. So, then we suddenly realize that God is capable of giving me much more than what I'm seeking. And that's how then these lower desires, if you like, go away. And then the only desire remains is, God, I want you because you are you. That's the thing.
Swamiji, can we get enlightenment when we are in deep sleep? Because in deep sleep there is no desire. We are not aware of our body, where we are. So is this possible?
enlightenment comes when all the karmas are burnt or all the karmas are eliminated. And when knowledge enters the heart, enlightenment comes. And that knowledge can come in any state, yes. So your answer is yes, it can come. In fact, enlightenment can come in dream as well. I once asked this question to my Vedanta teacher, that what if I enter into this highest samadhi in my dream, and then when I wake up in the morning, what will happen? Because it's only a dream samadhi. It's like if I win a lottery in my dream, next morning I wake up, I'm not a wealthy person, I'm just the same old person. So if I get into samadhi in my dream, what will happen? And actually his answer surprised me. He said, if you become enlightened in your dream, you are enlightened. So enlightenment can occur in any state. It kind of makes sense because we feel that an enlightenment in the waking state is like the real enlightenment. But this could be a dream. How do we know this is a waking state? Because even in dream, it just appears like a waking state, right? So, and therefore, since we cannot definitively say whether this itself is dream or not, in any of the states that we pass through, we just have to be enlightened. So don't give up the hope of enlightenment before going to sleep, saying, oh, I have to again start next morning. Maybe next morning when you wake up, you're already enlightened. That will be so easy if all this happens in the dream itself. Yeah. And one other thing, God's grace can come anytime, any place, in any state. There is no restriction of any kind. And oftentimes, God's grace comes at the most unexpected time, in a most unexpected way. And if we are not alert, we might miss it. God's grace might come and go, and we wouldn't even know. That would be a pity. It's possible, in fact, that God's grace is right here, right now, but we are not aware of it, so we cannot catch it. And that's what Ramakrishna meant by saying, the breeze of God's grace is always blowing. It never stops. And it's a very gentle breeze. It's not the hurricane. So it's very wonderful, but we won't benefit from that breeze unless we hoist the sails of the boat in which we are traveling. And so rather than seeing grace as some kind of a mysterious thing that happens, it's much more helpful to see that a grace, divine grace, is an ever-present reality. It's present now, it's present here. It's present everywhere, it's present all the time. All that I need to do is to become fit to catch that grace, to recognize that grace, and to be able to withstand that grace. So the more fit I become to receive that grace, the grace which is already present will enter into me. So the problem is not the absence of grace, the problem is the doors are not opened. And the doors are not opened because the key is in the hands of the ego. So that ego has to be crushed. Pull that key from the ego and open the door. It sounds so easy when you put it that way, right? Yes.
We're talking about enlightenment, So, I mean, somebody who is still not yet there in terms of, at least we know from our heart that we are still seeking there. So when do we cease the Vedic activities? Because the verse said that, control of Vedic activities is a kind of devotion and bhakti.
So that kind of like makes it difficult, because if you give up, then you're not attaining.
Right. Good. Very good question. You don't have to give up Vedic activities. The activities will give you up. It's like this. When Ramakrishna did puja, worship in the Kali temple, he did not give up worship. In fact, he was employed as a worshipper. He was doing his duty very meticulously, very carefully. So he didn't stop doing it. He was unable to do it. So he didn't give up worship. You could say that ritualistic worship gave him up. So that's what will happen. So by all means, we have to do what is right, and even to know what is right, sometimes we need some reference point. And so therefore, this is not to say the scriptures are bad or shouldn't be followed, but following scriptures, we should reach a point when we don't need the scriptures anymore. Because what the scriptures would ask me to do, I'm already doing. It's like if, for instance, sometimes people use a prayer book, or the kind of vespers that we do, or some of the songs that we sing on satsang. Now, we need a book. If you don't know the song, you need to look at the book and then sing. But let's say you have really done it for so often, for years together, that next time that song is being sung and someone gives you a book, you say, no, I don't need the book because I know it. And then you sing it, right? So that doesn't mean the book was useless. But what the book brought you to a stage when you could do without it. So scriptures will bring us to a stage when we can do without scriptures. In fact, if we cling to books and are not able to let go of them, then that becomes a bondage. So the purpose of books is to make us free of books. Otherwise, book worship itself becomes a great hurdle in life. When then people are willing to keep the Vedas on a mantle and do puja, and maybe they have not even opened the book. So book worship, then in fact a lot of harm has occurred in history because people put books above what the books asked us to do. And the beauty of Vedas is, in the Vedas itself it is said, Tatra Vedaha Aveda Bhavanti, means in that highest state, the Vedas become non-Vedas. The scriptures become non-scriptures. This an enlightened being stands on top of the Vedas. In other words, the enlightened being doesn't need the book anymore. When love enters the heart, do's and don'ts, one goes beyond all do's and don'ts because one automatically does what needs to be done. One automatically avoids what needs to be avoided. That's the idea. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I don't know if I need to say, don't need to say. It's about what you just told, that's enlightenment. If, for example, I don't look at it as a magic, but I know, for example, if at the end of the day I try to recall what happened to me, and I see something like love in my heart, I look at it as the biggest event of my day. It's my biggest achievement. It's very important. So if I look at this as a very important thing, then I see there is joy, for example. And then maybe next morning I wake up and what happened with this joy? So it means that if I striving for some high, for love, so it's already, I noticed yesterday. So what is it for? I noticed yesterday it was there, so it was, I achieved something happened. So I already can work around, and so it means that's you told to notice, to grasp it. That's habit of looking, as you told us at the end of the day, of event of my not only outer events but what happened inside. So it's very helpful. That's my idea, right?
Good. Yep, that's true. That's true. Yep. I'll conclude with just one small incident. Although we have now, remember, almost everything that we have said today pertains to that highest love, when that love reaches that highest stage. So don't feel disheartened or discouraged if we see that, well, I'm far from that, which is fine. Asking God for what we want is not bad. Because we are speaking about the highest love, this might be lower than that. But that doesn't mean that if you are now asking divine help in your own life for whatever it is that you need or want, that's good. Because there is even to fulfill one's worldly needs or material needs, if you seek God, that's not wrong in itself. I want to emphasize that. Because it's better to seek divine help for material goals than use material means for material goals. And so don't feel kind of guilty or bad if you're praying to God for whatever it is. It's good. That's what all devotees do. And that the incident I wanted to mention was this. This was mentioned by Swami Swahananda Ji, who was a very senior monk of our order. He passed away a few years ago. And so this was years ago. So probably this event, this occurred, I would think, sometime in late 60s. And he was mentioning this about another Swami of our order who was much senior even to him. His name was Swami Vividishananda. He was for many years the head of our center in Seattle. And so Swami Swahananda, when he came to this country in late 60s, he went to Seattle and saluted that elderly Swami who was there. And so Swami Swahananda told me this incident. And it was this. He said that Swami Vividishananda was, his health wasn't good. He was very elderly. The center needed a lot of maintenance and a lot of repair and stuff like that. And so the elderly Swami said, oh, I just prayed to Thakur, I just prayed to Sri Ramakrishna to make some funds available so that we'll be able to take care, because the buildings need attention and we needed funds. So I prayed to Sri Ramakrishna that the funds may come. And so this Swami was young, and little half jokingly, he told this elderly Swami, he said, what? You are asking Sri Ramakrishna instead of enlightenment, all that you asked him for was just like funds to kind of take care of the center in which you are? And he said, and I was so moved. He said that when he just jokingly kind of said that to that very senior elderly Swami, the Swami just kind of, he understood, obviously he understood the sense in which you were saying. And this elderly Swami said, oh, who else shall I ask for? And then Swami said, I realized in my youth how foolish of me to try to tell him what he already knew. But this also is a state of a great devotee. When you don't even think of seeking help from anyone other than the only being you know, your ideal. And so he said with such faith, such devotion, who else? So he didn't even think it's possible that some other source might be able to provide him funds. The only source he could think of was Ramakrishna. And you can see. So I mentioned this to show, therefore, if you turn to God to to fulfill whatever your needs are, don't feel bad about it. The more we are able to remind ourselves that ultimately God alone is the fulfiller of all our needs. If we become little babies, little children, if God is our father, God is our mother, God is our brother, sister, God is our friend, God is our all in all, then where else shall we go to? As little babies, where else would a baby go other than to her own mother or father? And if God is our everything, who else shall we ask for? So if we remember this, then don't feel bad that when you're praying, when your prayer is not always about wanting a long life for God. That stage might come, but wanting a long life for yourself in order to serve God is also a good prayer. So there are a lot of these things that need to, very nuanced things in the study of bhakti, which we'll study in the weeks ahead. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Tomorrow is Kali Puja. So the puja will begin evening 6:30. We expect it to be over by around 9:30. So I would invite all of you, bring your friends or whoever is interested. The Kali Puja, as many of you have already attended in previous years, know that generally done at night after it's dark. And so that will be the puja. As usual, we'll have music, there will be worship, there will be prayer, meditation, there will be flower offering, and then there will be nice, hot, delicious khichdi, prasad. So all of you are welcome. And then the rest of the programs will be as usual. We'll have meditation on Saturdays and Tuesdays. And on Sunday, our satsang subject will be questions about God. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.